Here's another word that is actually not in the Bible. Divorce. Yes, you heard that right. Not in the Bible. There's actually no Hebrew or Greek word for it. Now, I realize that sexual immorality and marital infidelity is as old as the human race, but the Bible does not talk anything about what we are calling, in modern terms, divorce. There's just no such concept, and there can't be. That's where we're going to pull the rug out from all the debates about it, both the conservatives and the liberals. In the Bible, I just showed that marriage is defined by Genesis 2:22-24 as becoming one flesh and refers to a historical event that takes place between a man and a woman. You can't remove the event from history, and you can't undo one flesh any more than you can take a child produced by the couple and split him back into two parts. The part coming from the man and the part coming from the woman, in a physical sense. The bottom line is, one flesh is defined by Jesus as what God joins together, and you can't undo the Word of God, although, as Jesus said, you can nullify or make to no effect the Word of God by your traditions. So, what we see today are traditions, not Bible. Certainly a secular judge in a secular courtroom does not have the authority to invalidate the Word of God. So, the certificate he issues is only for civil purposes and does not invalidate the biblical marriage, the one flesh. In your English translations, you may see the word divorce, but translators are just taking the liberty of translating that from a variety of other, more general words that don't by themselves mean divorce. Here again, translators reframe the original text to fit their contemporary culture, contemporary social practices, and associated language. The most common word translated divorce is the word apoluo, which is from the preposition or prefix apo, which means off or away from, and the verb luo, which means loose, as to loose something. The verb, not the noun. The compound literally means off loose, meaning to dismiss or release something, or someone in a general sense, not necessarily one's man or woman, and not necessarily even a person. For example, using that same word in Acts 13:3, after fasting and prayer, the disciples at Antioch loosed off, in other words dismissed, the newly commissioned Paul and Barnabas and sent them on their way. Obviously, you would certainly never say that they were divorcing them. And in Matthew 1:19, Joseph is intending to loose off Mary, whom he was only engaged to and had not yet married. You cannot divorce a person whom you have not married, even by modern definitions of divorce. I bet every one of you have wondered about that. How could Joseph divorce Mary if he was only engaged to be married to her? It's because, listen, he wasn't going to, quote, divorce her, unquote. Then there's the word apostasia, literally off-standing, from which we get the English word apostasy. For example, some were saying that Paul taught apostasy from Moses in Acts 21:21. And in 2 Thessalonians 2:3, we are told that the apostasy comes first before the day of the Lord. So that doesn't fundamentally mean divorce either, although translators might choose to translate it that way. That is the Koine Greek term used in connection with Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4, where there was a scenario mentioned in the law of Moses talking about if a man should write a certificate of apostasion and send his woman away, then ... But it was never granting legitimacy to such an action. The Pharisees at the time of Jesus read into the scriptures what was not there, reciting a tradition of men. Moses did not command or direct anyone to divorce anyone, or to write any such certificate in the first place, or to send a woman away. If you read the text of Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4, in context you will see that it is written to disallow the man from marrying the woman twice. Although there is no Hebrew word for marry, the word used is Baal, possess or rule over as one's own, and lakach, take, or just the Greek word take, labe or labean, in the Septuagint translation by the Jews into the Koine Greek in the 3rd century BC. Obviously, you cannot go back and marry a person whom you already married if there is no such thing as reversing a marriage. To marry again would be to deny what the Word of God said in the first place. The two become one flesh, is irreversible. On top of that, such a marriage would be the case of a man marrying a married woman, in the case that the second man should likewise send the woman away. On top of that, such a marriage would be the case of a man marrying an adulteress, since, according to the words of Jesus, his sending her away and the second marriage with the second man caused her to become an adulteress. To marry an adulteress would be to marry a defiled woman, which is something the law of Moses is specifically prohibiting here. Finally, the original man would then be committing adultery against the second man if he was still alive. The corresponding Hebrew word used in Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4 that is usually translated divorce is keritheth. These words occur in only 2 other places in the Old Testament, Isaiah 51 and Jeremiah 3:8, where God speaks of Israel and Judah backsliding and worshiping other gods. So he sends her away. These 2 passages illuminate Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4 as pointing to the relationship between Yahweh and Israel. But we know that God has not rejected Israel even to this day, such as in Romans 11, Revelation 7, and so on. As Romans 11, 1 through 2 says, I ask then, did God reject his people? By no means. I am an Israelite myself, a descendant of Abraham, from the tribe of Benjamin. God did not reject his people. Romans 11:25 through 26 says, Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob, quoting Isaiah 59:20 in Romans 11:25 through 26. So you see that regardless of these statements in the Old Testament about God sending Israel away for her apostasy, God has restoration and reconciliation in his plan for the genealogical nation of Israel. By contrast, Modern divorcees and divorces are permanent with no consideration for reconciliation whatsoever. If you want to model your modern divorce certificates by how God treated Israel, then you must give opportunity for the one you divorce to be reconciled and return to you. Now, if there was a word that could have been used to describe a legal biblical divorce in the scriptures, it would be the word used in the verse I mentioned before, when talking about what marriage is. Romans 7:2. Let's continue reading that verse after where we left off. By law, an underman woman is bound to her man as long as he is alive. Yet, if the man should die, she is katergete from the law of the man. The word katergete, which is dictionary entry katergeo, inflected katergete here, means release, abolish, nullify, or discard. Since it describes a woman being released from a man upon his death, you would expect the word to be used with regard to being released from a man due to, quote, divorce, unquote, if there was such a concept. But it is not used anywhere else in the context of what we call marriage. Go search for it. It's Strong's number G2673. You won't find it anywhere else having to do with marriage. Note also that it is the law of the man that she is released from, not the law of marriage. Since again, marriage refers to the act of marrying, not the modern concept of marital status. The law of the man is recited by, literally, the man Adam in Genesis 2:23, who declared that the woman was bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, which is the reason or cause, as it states, for the Word of God declaring what we call marriage in the next verse, Genesis 2:24. The two become one flesh. You see how simple this all really is to understand. It's not complicated at all. It's just the serial marriages that complicate things and the traditions of men. Now, let's consider another language point. In the Koine Greek, it would be also easy and straightforward to construct the opposite of the word marry, simply by adding the negative prefix a, or perhaps anti, to the verb gameo, marry, or to form a verb meaning unmarry, the negative of marry, which is essentially what we would today call a divorce. No such word or usage exists in the Bible, even though such ad hoc language constructions are freely used in the Koine Greek language in ad hoc ways. Jesus did not say what God has married, gagameke, let no man unmarry, antigamasato, or those who have married, gagamakasi, let no man unmarry, antigamasato. There is no such word or concept as unmarry. So, there is no way, either in the Old Testament or the New Testament, to divorce, as we would say, what we would today refer to as a marriage.